Greetings, one and all. Welcome to the second Elite Ice Hockey League Weekly Roundup Podcast. Today is September the 18th, 2017, and you guys seem to like this idea when I put out the pilot episode, as it were, last week. So here I am making another podcast. Remember, if you want this podcast to keep going into the future, make sure you keep watching and maybe recommend it to a few friends to spread the word. Anyway, let's get on with the second podcast, shall we? We shall begin with a new segment that I mentioned in last week's inaugural podcast. This segment is, of course, Comments of the Week. In this segment, I will take several comments from the last week's podcast to either highlight what you guys thought about the events that took place in the previous week of the Elite Ice Hockey League, the podcast itself, or to have a laugh at the jokes that you guys make, either about me, the channel, or the Elite Ice Hockey League. First comment is by Kalesbro. I think I pronounced that right. And it says, by the way, I agree with you about only being as good as your last game. A few years ago, Coventry won the league when everyone thought they would lose. Well, thank you for sending this in, Kalesbro. I really appreciate that. I like this comment because it reiterates once again that you can be predicted to do well until the cows come home or till you're blue in the face, but unless you actually go out onto the ice and get the job done when you need to, then you can forget about expectations that are put upon you or what you have to do. You need to do it. Whether somebody says you have to do something is one thing. Whether you actually go out and do it, that's a different thing. Also, it highlights how in hockey nothing is certain, and there is always a dark horse team that will surprise the league by being better than anyone thought they would, which I think this year might be Milton Keynes by the looks of it so far. So thank you, Kalesbro, and thanks for watching, buddy. I appreciate that. Next up is Owen Olsen, which says, great video. Well, thank you, Owen. That's very nice of you. Could you tell that one was a bit of an ego boost for me? Good. I'm glad you could. And lastly, we have Soviet Reaper, who says, I've been trying to get into other leagues besides the NHL, and this podcast can really help me. Plus, I love your content, so it's even better. Oh, thanks. You really know your stuff, and I love it. Well, that's good. Please continue this. Well, here I am. I already know two teams just from this one podcast, the Nottingham Panthers and the Sheffield Steelers. Very good teams to know, I might add. The more I hear the same thing, the better it is for me to remember it. So if you keep saying team names over and over and talk about players over and over, then I will remember. I look forward to listening to the second podcast. First off, thank you for the kind words, Soviet. Appreciate that. And secondly, this comment highlights a demographic of viewers I never quite expected when starting this podcast. Those in other countries who want to learn more about the British Elite League or other leagues around the world. So thank you, Reaper. Glad this is an educational experience as well as an entertaining video for you. So, those were the comments of the week. Make sure to leave your comments regarding this podcast below for a chance to be featured in next week's podcast. Now we shall move on and look over all the scores from the past week of the Elite League. One quick note, in the inaugural podcast I gave my prediction for the game on the 19th of September between Dundee and Sheffield. However, as I've decided to record these podcasts on a Monday and the game on the 19th hasn't actually happened yet, I will feature that score in next week's podcast. Anyway, here are the scores from over this weekend. So, on the 16th of September, we had a Challenge Cup game between the Belfast Giants and the Dundee Stars, and it was Belfast 7, Dundee 4. Sylvester scores a pair of goals and adds an assist, whilst Connolly adds 3 points to his season numbers, as the Giants get their first points in the Challenge Cup this year. Belfast had an up and down week last week, but got off to a great start this week by getting themselves on the score sheet a lot. Their defence could do with a bit of work, but they managed to get 7 goals on Dundee, give themselves their first Challenge Cup win of the year. Sounds pretty good. Well done, gentlemen. Then a game between the Coventry Blaze and the Manchester Storm, and the score was Coventry 5, Manchester nothing. Wow, that's pretty impressive for Coventry, actually. So, Nastic gets the shutout, Valorant gets a pair of goals, whilst Ferreira and Clements pick up a pair of points each as the Blades bulldoze through the Storm on their way to their first EIHL League win of the season. Coventry are a team I'm not expecting to do too well compared to the rest of the teams in the league this year, but they have got a solid win against a strong team in Manchester, which is especially impressive with the shutout. Like, if they'd won 5-4, I still would have been relatively impressed with Coventry, but the fact that they shut them out 5-0, it's clear that they were in the driver's seat for this game, so good work, Coventry. Then we had a game between the Cardiff Devils and the Sheffield Steelers, which was my pick last week for the one to watch. And the score was Cardiff 4, Sheffield 3 in overtime. This was a league game. I should just add that Belfast and Dundee Challenge Cup game, Coventry and Manchester was a league game, and Cardiff 4-3 in overtime against Sheffield, and that was a league game also. Now, this game featured one of the craziest overtime goals I've ever seen by Justin Farnier, where the puck bounces off the glass behind the net, bounces back towards the net, hits off Ervin's Mustakov, off his back and into the net to give the victory for the Devils in a familiar matchup between the two teams, especially during championship games last year. This game was my one to watch in the inaugural podcast, as I said, and I can promise that it did not disappoint. I watched it and I had a bloody good time watching it. Then there is a game between the Milton Keynes and the Braehead clan that took place, which was a league game. And the score was Milton Keynes 3 and Braehead 1. So goals from Hook, Tate and Doucette give the Milton Keynes Lightning their second win in 3 games since joining the Elite Ice Hockey League. I must say, Milton Keynes are impressing myself and probably the rest of the league as a whole by securing some clear wins. So, nice work, Milton Keynes. Good job. Then there was a league game between the Nottingham Panthers and the Guildford Flames, and the score was 3-2 in overtime to the Nottingham Panthers. Brett Perlini and Robert Farmer each pick up a goal and an assist as the Panthers stay undefeated in their Elite League record. On the flip side, Guildford have now picked up 3 points in 3 games in the Elite Ice Hockey League and have had a better start than most would have thought. Even though they lost, they are doing some good things down in Surrey, especially their goaltending. Stewart was a beast against the Panthers in that game, without a doubt. And then the last game for the 16th of September was a Challenge Cup game between the Fife Flyers and the Edinburgh Capitals. And the score was Fife 5, Edinburgh 2. Bloodoff and LeBlanc pick up a pair of helpers as the Flyers take 2 points for their Challenge Cup group stage. Edinburgh seems to be struggling very early on in this season, especially against other Scottish teams, and judging how I think the season will play out, this struggle could continue for the Capitals team. Now the 16th of September has been done, we move on to the 17th of September, and there was a game between the Coventry Blaze and the Braehead clan, and the score was Coventry 4, Braehead 1. Valorand and Robinson notch a pair of points each as Coventry take 4 points over the weekend out of 4. I think Coventry had the best weekend of any team, without a doubt, as they scored 9 goals this weekend and only allowed 1, with 1 shutout. And I don't think it gets better than that, you know, except for 2 shutouts, like only allowing 1 goal in a weekend. That's pretty good. And on the flip side, Braehead are struggling early this season, as they've been unable to get a win in the Elite League season in their first 2 games in the season. Is this a sign of things to come for Braehead? Perhaps. Could they bounce back? Well, of course they could. The problem is, Braehead have been playing teams that I see as middle to bottom of the league teams. So if they can't beat them, they're going to have trouble competing for the league title against some of the best of the best. Something needs to start happening in Braehead if the team wants to compete, that's for sure. But good job to Coventry, they have turned some heads this weekend with their solid play. Then there was a game between the Manchester Storm and the Milton Keynes Lightning, and the score was Manchester 6, Milton Keynes 2. Hammond and Becker each pick up 3 points as the Manchester Storm defeat the new Lightning team to gain 2 Elite League points for the season. Manchester were hoping for 4 points this weekend, but they will have to settle with 2, thanks to a strong effort against Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes will also have to settle with 2 points over this last weekend, as they have now won 2 games and lost 2 games since joining the Elite Ice Hockey League. So they're going 500, that's not too bad. I think Manchester are doing pretty well this year and will continue to succeed with the team that they have, and Milton Keynes have shown no sign of slowing down in the top league in Britain. These 2 teams, I think, are ones to keep an eye on as the season continues. Then there was a game in Cardiff between the Devils and the Nottingham Panthers. A very big game there between 2 very strong teams. And the score was Cardiff 4, Nottingham 1. Haddad, Morissette and Crowder each pick up a pair of points as the Devils defeat the Panthers in the first game between these 2 CHL teams this season. Nottingham seemed like they had some good scoring chances and even had more shots on goal than Cardiff, but they had to go up against Ben Bounds, who seemed on pretty top form in that game. Sometimes you can have the best game ever, but if you're up against a goalie who is having a solid night, you will be hard pressed to get the victory. That seemed to be the case in Cardiff on Sunday for the Panthers. But the Devils get 4 out of 4 points for the weekend, so they are off to a good start in the Elite League, going 2 wins, no losses. So nice job to Cardiff. And then there was the game between the Sheffield Steelers and the Guildford Flames, the one that I went to go and watch in Guildford with one of my friends. And the score was Sheffield 7, Guildford 1. Armstrong and Dowd pick up a pair of goals and Matthew Waugh adds 3 assists as the Steelers steamroll past the Flames. Having seen how well the Flames have played since the start of the season, I wasn't expecting such a beatdown of the Guildford side. Seems like the Flames had run out of gas after the Panthers game the night previously, as their passes just weren't connecting, and they were trying to be too fancy and make the extra play for the perfect setup, but it just didn't happen. They needed some weaker chances that could translate into something else. I think the league was waiting for one of these new teams to be blown out in a game and show that they should be the underdogs or should be one of the bottom teams, and it looks like we finally got what we wished for, essentially. Good job by the Steelers, though. They dominated pretty much the entire game, and it was fun to watch from their perspective. Penultimately, in the games this weekend, we had a game between the Belfast Giants and the Edinburgh Capitals. And the score was Belfast 6, Edinburgh 5. Colin Shields scores in his 600th Elite Ice Hockey League game, and Sylvester adds 2 goals and an assist as the Giants hold on to win their first Challenge Cup game this season against Edinburgh. Rather than talk about it in the news section, I'll just go ahead and say congratulations to Colin Shields on 600 EIHL games. That's a pretty awesome achievement, and when he calls it a day, he will definitely be known as one of the best to ever skate in the league. But Edinburgh, oh Edinburgh, you just can't get any puck luck, can you? Usually if you score 5 goals, you'll win a hockey game. Except when the other team scores 6 goals. The Capitals, as I expected, have struggled early in the season, and similarly to Braehead, will need to wake themselves up and get something going soon, as it's easy to fall out of contention for the league title very early on if you have a poor first 10 games of the season. Will Edinburgh break out of this rut they have put themselves in? Only time will tell. And then finally, on the 17th of September, we had a game between the Dundee Stars and the Fife Flyers. And the score was Dundee 7, Fife 5. Jimmy Jensen's hat-trick for the Dundee Stars and Anderson's 3-point night helped Dundee hold off Fife in the Challenge Cup matchup between these two teams. Well, at least we've now got our first hat-trick of the 17-18 season, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's not in a league game, it's in a Challenge Cup game, but we finally got our first hat-trick of the season. And all it took was about 4 days of playing time, which is good. And now Dundee have had a few high goal total games in recent weeks, usually in the other team's favour, but they are finally on the winning end of one that matters as they take 2 points against the Flyers. Fife, on the other hand, pushed back in the third period to give themselves a game and put themselves back into the game and make it somewhat competitive again, but the lasting damage had already been done as the Flyers lose the 11-goal game. Well played by Dundee, hard luck for Fife, but it seemed like a pretty high-intensity game and one worth watching. So the weekend of games has come and gone and the scores have been added to the history books. So let's see how that changed the Elite League standings so far. Manchester, Coventry, Milton Keynes, Cardiff and Nottingham are all tied for first in the league with 4 points. Sheffield are next with 3 points, Belfast have 2 points, Guildford have 1 point and Braehead have 0 points. Fife, Dundee and Edinburgh also all have 0 points, but they have yet to play an Elite League game this season, so they're kind of exempt from this sort of look at it. And looking at this, Manchester and Coventry have played the most games out of the lot, I believe. And they've played some decent games, so surprise, surprise, they're at the top. Cardiff, Nottingham are in there. Of course, the biggest surprise for me is Milton Keynes. Like, they're at the top of the league. They're tied for first in the league. Of course, most teams have only won 2 games at the moment, so there isn't really much in it between first and last, as Braehead, who have played 2 games and lost both of them, will hopefully be clutching onto that fact. But there's some teams that are starting to try and push ahead early, which is good. And one of them is a team that just joined the league this year. So that's good to know. It's good to know that the 2 teams that have been brought in are being competitive already. They're not just the charity cases, which I don't think anybody wants them to be, you know? So that's good. And then to summarise the Challenge Cup standings, Sheffield lead Group A with 4 points, Belfast lead Group B with 5 points, and Guildford and Cardiff are tied for the lead in Group C, I believe, with 4 points. I can't remember exactly. I haven't actually got that written down. You would think I would, but I don't. So Cardiff and Guildford are tied for the lead in Group C. Now to the current league leaders in the various categories. John Armstrong and Mark Valorand are tied for the lead in goals scored with 4 each. Ben O'Connor, Matt Becker, Mike Hammond, Jordan Petrus and Brett Robinson are all tied for the lead in assists with 4. Matt Becker and Jordan Petrus are tied for the league lead in points with 7. Ben Bounds leads the league in goals against average with 1.93. Ben Bounds and Mika Vikman are tied for the lead in save percentage with 0.929. And now with regard to the Challenge Cup leaders, Jordan Marr leads in goals against average with 0 and save percentage of 1. Not a bad record. Pretty decent. And Sebastian Sylvester, Peter LeBlanc and Mike Hammond are all tied for the lead in points in the Challenge Cup with 6. Next up, let's take a look at the latest news stories over the last week. Charlie Mosey has signed a long-term deal with the Fife Flyers. The 26-year-old winger impressed the coaches so much in his short-term deal that he got signed to a full-year contract to last the whole season. Charlie Mosey picked up his first assist and point in the Flyers game against Edinburgh and spent last season with the Elmira Jackals of the ECHL, where he had 19 points in 56 games. To me, this is a good depth signing for Fife, who I think need to improve their depth group more if they want to compete with the top teams. It's clear that Mosey's track record doesn't show him as a goal-scoring forward, as I looked at him on EliteProspects.com. But if he is strong on the puck and can help keep the puck out of the Fife net and be a solid bottom 6 guy for Fife, then he should make Flyers fans very happy. Next, Sheffield Steelers young gun Kieran Brown has signed a 2-way contract with the EIHL Blackburn Hawks. The 16-year-old impressed all the coaching staff and players in the Steelers organisation during his stint with the team during the pre-season, and he has been given a 2-way deal so Brown can gain additional ice time with the Blackburn Hawks, so he can play games in the top 6 with the Blackburn Hawks, but he can join the Steelers during the week to train with them. This is the ideal situation for somebody in Brown's situation. This is the ideal thing that could happen for him. He trains with the big team and gets the assistance of the Steelers trainers at a key point of his development at 16 years old, and then he gets to play as one of the top forwards and get all the ice time he needs with Blackburn. Which I might add, in his first game he scored a hat-trick with the team. It's a win-win situation for both Brown and the Steelers, who could have themselves a star British player in a few years if they make sure that they work Kieran Brown correctly. Next, the Department of Player Safety decided to review 5 plays over the first week of the Elite Ice Hockey League, including the Scottish Elite Cup. Each instance was looked at to see if a suspension was necessary for the games that took place this past weekend. Here were the rulings. Belfast's Jim Vandermeer was assessed a 2 + 10 minute checking from behind penalty during the Belfast game against Guildford on the 9th of September and has been given a 5+ game penalty for checking from behind, which will be added to his playing record. Guildford's Cruz Reddick was assessed a 2 + 10 minute checking from behind penalty in the same game on the 9th of September, but the Department of Player Safety will be taking no further action as they deem it unnecessary. Dundee's Chris Lawrence was assessed a 2 + 10 minute checking from behind penalty during the Dundee Fife game on the 9th of September, but the Department of Player Safety will be taking no further action as they deem it unnecessary. Penultimately, Dundee's Tyler Brickler was assessed a 2 + 10 minute checking from behind penalty during the Dundee-Edinburgh game on the 10th of September, but once again the Department of Player Safety will be taking no further action as they deem it unnecessary. And finally, Dundee's Malcolm Gould was assessed a match penalty for slew-footing during the same September the 10th game. The Department of Player Safety has decided to uphold this decision and the penalty stands, which carries an automatic 1-game suspension, which has not been increased by the Department of Player Safety. So only 1 suspension and a penalty on a record out of 5 instances this past week. Not sure if that's good or bad. It's good that most of these players get to keep on playing next weekend, but it's kind of bad that so many hits from behind haven't been punished even more. What do you think about the rulings? Let me know below. I want to get your guys' opinions on this. Next up in the news, the Edinburgh Capitals have announced Mike D'Orazio as captain for the 17-18 season. Mike Cazzola, Igor Valero and Patel Voroboyev have been named the assistant captains also. I don't know too much about these players, but congrats to all of them, especially D'Orazio, for making a good enough impact to get the most important letter on the front of his jersey. Lastly, in the news, we are going to end this news section on a bit of a low note, but something that needs to be talked about, especially because of the impact that it can have on the sport. The Nottingham Panthers ice hockey team have withdrawn their contract to Ukrainian goaltender Eduard Zakharchenko. This follows the news that Zakharchenko has been suspended indefinitely by the International Ice Hockey Federation, pending an investigation into an international game at the end of last season where Zach, as I shall call him, allegedly promised to lose a game between Ukraine and Korea by a 2-goal margin and throw the game for a sum of money. However, Korea won in a shootout 2-1, so the terms of the contract weren't exactly lived up to as they should have been. Now, this is a really awful situation for everyone involved, and it is an example of the worst parts of the sports industry. If he is found guilty, which he likely will be because there is supposedly, allegedly, a lot of evidence against him, Zach could potentially be permanently suspended from playing ice hockey. And he's 22 years old. He's 22 years old and he's potentially, chances are it won't happen, but he's potentially facing a lifetime ban from ice hockey, or being able to play ice hockey, coach ice hockey, teach ice hockey, anything like that. And at 22 years old, it would be another example of someone who had so much going for him, who had talent, who had the drive, who threw it all away over one mistake or one larger payday than usual. Granted, he made a mistake and chances are he feels he made a mistake, which is good. He's showing remorse, hopefully. That's good. However, mistake or not, things like this need to be punished, you know? Things like this really do need to be punished. However, mistake or not, things like this need to be punished, ladies and gentlemen. Even if he isn't permanently suspended, Zach's reputation as a player has been really badly damaged by this situation, and I hope that he will find it difficult to find work going forward. That's not to say that I don't think he should ever play hockey ever again, but he needs to understand the ramifications of what he's done here. I'm kind of having a go at Zakharchenko here, but it's because of the bigger picture here. It's not just, this 22-year-old Ukrainian, he made a mistake. Most of the time I'd be like, well, you made a mistake. You've got to own up to the consequences. However, this is the sport in general. It's a really rubbish situation. But this stuff needs to be punished. Otherwise, people will keep doing it and it will become an acceptable thing for hockey players to take bribes and throw games. Which anyone like myself who has any love of the sport of ice hockey should completely condone. Paycheck or not, something like this gives hockey a bad name. And especially in a country like Britain, where we're still trying to grow and appeal this sport to a wider audience, the Elite League doesn't need this kind of negative press. And I'm glad he isn't coming over to England now, even though I am a Panthers fan, and even though we need a better goaltender than Sam Gospel right now. I'm glad that he's not coming over because it's the precedent. I don't care if he's the best goaltender the Panthers could have ever had. Like, sure, I might think differently if he'd come over and basically got the Grand Slam, but that's not the point, you know? This is all about saying, no, we're not going to let players get away with stuff like this. They get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, in the NHL, millions of dollars. If they get away with it, then we're no better, essentially, is what they're saying. And the International Ice Hockey Federation, sometimes they can put a damper on things, sometimes, but I'm really glad they have taken a stance on this and gone, no, you are not going anywhere, you are going to be punished for what you have done, which is good. It shows that they're being proactive, they're taking the initiative on this, and I'm really happy about that. I know it's a bit of a rubbish and a bit of a downer to end on for the news stories, but it is something that needs to be talked about, and I want to hear your opinions on the situation down in the comments below. Do let me know what you think. Moving on to my Game of the Week. This is an award I give out every week for the game I think was the best game of the week. Pretty self-explanatory. This week the award goes to the 4-3 overtime Cardiff-Sheffield game on Saturday. The game-winning goal alone is enough for me to give the award to this game. Plus, it was a hard-fought game that was as good as the Elite League gets. So if you didn't get the chance to check it out because you were watching your favourite team play, or you just were busy or whatever, go and check it out if you can. It's a brilliant, brilliant game. I very much enjoyed watching it. Now, the game of the week is out of the way. Let's move on to prediction time. This is the segment where I go through each upcoming game next week and say who I think will win and why, of course. So, just before we start, we've already done the 19th of September, which we predicted in the inaugural podcast, between the Stars and the Steelers, where I thought the Steelers would win. So we shall move straight on to the 23rd of September, in a game between the Manchester Storm and the Guildford Flames. Now, I think Manchester are going to win this one. Yes, Manchester are going to get this victory, in my opinion. Manchester are a team on the rise this year, and I think Guildford have some mental barriers to get over after they were beaten down this weekend by Sheffield. Plus, there are a lot of holes in Guildford's game, which were showcased in the Sheffield game, which will take time to remove, and it will take time to iron out the creases of this situation. So I'm going to go with Manchester in that game against Guildford. Then there is a game between the Nottingham Panthers and the Braehead Clan. And I'm going to go the Nottingham Panthers. This one, I think, is one of the easiest ones out of the week to predict, in my opinion. Nottingham have a chip on their shoulder after losing to the Devils, and Braehead are struggling against teams far worse than the Panthers. So unless the Panthers take a really bad day off or half of their team get struck with food poisoning, I think the Panthers will take this one with relatively little difficulty, if I'm honest. Sorry, Braehead fans, but you can see where I'm coming from, right? Then there is a game between the Belfast Giants and the Sheffield Steelers. I'm going to mix things up a bit with this one and go with the Belfast Giants. I think Belfast are going to take the game on the 23rd of September. Belfast are one of the top teams with Cardiff, Nottingham and Sheffield. They're usually the one that's kind of left out of the top three. And I think that they will play a good game and stun the Steelers fans with a win. The teams are pretty evenly matched in terms of league standing and talent on the roster, so this game could go either way, but I'm going to go with Belfast for this one. I think they deserve a little bit of puck luck now. Then the last game on the 23rd of September is between Fife and Coventry. And I think Coventry's going to win this one. I think their double win this week will give this team some huge confidence going into next week, whereas the Flyers will look to bounce back from a high-scoring game on both sides of the ice. And the fact that it didn't actually favour them is a pretty bad thing in their opinion. So I think Coventry, 9 goals scored, 1 allowed in 2 games. They're looking pretty strong. And as I said, they were pretty much the best team last week, in my opinion. Out of all the teams, Coventry did the best in terms of goals and in terms of record as well. So I definitely think that Coventry are going to take this one. Maybe they'll start climbing up the standings. Who knows? We'll find out next week. And then we have the 24th of September, where the rest of the games of the week will be held. The first being the Sheffield Steelers against the Belfast Giants. So it looks like there's going to be a home and home next week. And this one, I think Sheffield's going to take it. I think the home and home matchup will be split between the two teams of Sheffield and Belfast. Belfast, I think, will put up a good showing in the first game and get the win. Then I think Sheffield will have a bit of a chip on their shoulder and they'll really want to stick it to Belfast. And they're a team that they can... Sheffield are a tough team that can play a very physical game and wear the other team down and then start playing a really speedy, high-intensity, lots of passes, really good shots kind of game. So I think Sheffield will take this game and the home and home will be split. Both teams will take 2 points over the weekend. Then there is a game between the Cardiff Devils and the Manchester Storm, and I am going to go with the Cardiff Devils on this one. I think Manchester once again will have to settle for 2 points on the weekend. I think Cardiff, they are currently undefeated in the league standings. I do not expect that to change with the one game that they play this week. I think Cardiff are a very strong team. They're gelling together. They've got chemistry. Most of the team is intact from last year, so pretty much most of the team knows each other, so I think they're going to be okay. Then there is a game between the Guildford Flames and the Nottingham Panthers in Guildford. And I think Nottingham's going to take this one based off the overtime victory they had in Nottingham and based on the fact that Guildford have started to slack a little bit, essentially. They've taken their foot off the gas slightly. I think this is going to be a big question about Guildford's character as a team going into the rest of this season? Are they going to be a team that can bounce back easily and get the job done and try and compete for the top of the league? Or are they going to be a team that keep falling into the same habits, the same inconsistencies? They're going to keep trying to make that extra play instead of actually just trying to get it to the net, and are they going to lose a lot of games through that? This, I think, is a very big question that the Guildford Flames need to figure out at some point. Hopefully, they will have figured it out before this game. Hopefully, the Nottingham Panthers can win, though, because I really want Nottingham to win, especially after losing to Cardiff. And then lastly, we have a game between the Edinburgh Capitals and the Braehead Clan. The bottom of the barrel, ladies and gentlemen, is what this game is. We're proper scraping at the bottom of the barrel for this one. But I think the Edinburgh Capitals are finally going to get some points on the season. Whether it's a Challenge Cup game or a league game, I'm not entirely sure. But I think that the Edinburgh Capitals, they're due. They're really due some points. So are Braehead, but Braehead, I don't think there's any confidence in Braehead at the moment. I would not be surprised if their locker room's a bit down. The same with Edinburgh, but Edinburgh were last in the league last year, so as long as they don't get last, they will have improved on last season. So the only way really is up for the Edinburgh Capitals. I think the mind games might play into this one a little bit more. And that's all for this week's EIHL Weekly Roundup Podcast. Make sure to leave your comments regarding the last week for a chance to be featured in next week's podcast. Want to get as many comments of the week as we can every episode. But thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and